The security gate buzzed reluctantly as Dr. Alina Verdi pressed her thumb against the biometric scanner. She glanced back at me, her emerald eyes narrowing slightly beneath her wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Wright, what I'm about to show you has been seen by exactly 3 people in the past 5 years. I expect your discretion to match the privilege." I nodded, clutching my notebook tighter than necessary. "Of course, Dr. Verdi, and please call me Marcus." After months of unanswered emails and rejected interview requests, I could hardly believe I was here. Dr. Alina Verdi, the botanist whose controversial research papers had rocked the scientific community before she vanished from public view, had finally agreed to an interview. One interview, she'd emphasized. No photographs of her specimens without express permission. No GPS data attached to any digital files. When the inner door slid open, the humid air hit me like a physical force. My glasses fogged immediately, and I removed them, blinking as the world around me sharpened into focus. "My God," I whispered, unable to maintain journalistic detachment. The greenhouse stretched before us, far larger than its exterior suggested. Curved glass panels soared 3 stories above, filtering the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of colors. But it was what grew beneath that canopy that stole my breath. Plants, at least I assumed they were plants, of every imaginable hue spread throughout the space. Some pulsed with subtle bioluminescence despite the daylight. Others moved slightly despite the absence of any breeze. "This section contains primarily modified nepenthes and Drosera variations," Alina explained, watching my expression carefully. "The carnivorous species respond particularly well to genetic enhancement." "Enhancement?" I managed, watching a crimson-veined pitcher plant that had to be at least 4 feet tall. Its open mouth glistened with what looked like liquid mercury. "Layman's terms, Mr. Wright," she said, the slightest smile softening her severe features. "I adjust their natural capabilities." I scribbled frantically in my notebook. "And these adjustments. This is what caused the controversy with the Botanical Society." Alina's posture stiffened. "That, among other things, most of my former colleagues lack vision. They see only ecological threats where I see solutions." She gestured toward a section of plants with broad, silvery leaves. "These modified specimens can absorb heavy metals from contaminated soil at rates 50 times faster than their natural counterparts." As we moved deeper into the greenhouse, I noticed subtle security measures throughout. Motion sensors, cameras, and what appeared to be hermetically sealed sections. The center of the space featured a small laboratory within a glass enclosure, equipment humming quietly. "You live here too?" I asked, spotting what looked like living quarters tucked into a corner. "I prefer to remain close to my work," she replied, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "The specimens require constant monitoring." Throughout our tour, I noticed how the plants seemed to react to Alina's presence, turning toward her, unfurling new leaves, some even changing color subtly. When I pointed this out, she merely nodded. "Plants are far more responsive to their environment than most people realize," she said, her fingers gently caressing a vibrant, blue-petaled flower that seemed to shiver at her touch. "They sense, they respond, they remember." "Remember," I echoed. Alina fixed me with that intense gaze again. "Perhaps that's not the appropriate term for your article. Let's say they adapt." As the tour continued, I couldn't help but notice the softening in her demeanor when she interacted with her plants. The reserved, almost cold scientist transformed into something else entirely, gentle, nurturing, passionate. It struck me that Alina Verdi had created not just a research facility, but a sanctuary. And for reasons I couldn't yet fathom, she had decided to let me in. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3 weeks had passed since my initial visit to Alina's sanctuary, and somehow I'd managed to secure a second interview. Then a third. The feature piece I'd originally planned had evolved into something more substantial, potentially even a book, if Alina continued to grant me access to her world. Today, I arrived to find her kneeling beside a patch of what looked like ordinary ferns, except their fronds shimmered with an iridescent blue when they moved. "You're punctual," she remarked without looking up. "I appreciate that." I set down my recording equipment. "These are new, aren't they? I don't remember seeing them last week." Alina smiled, the expression transforming her usually serious face. "Good observation. They matured rather suddenly." She gestured for me to kneel beside her. Hold out your hand, palm down about 6 inches above the fronds. I hesitated only briefly before complying. To my astonishment, the ferns began to reach upward, their delicate fronds stretching toward my hand. They're responding to your body heat, Elena explained, but there's more to it than that. She placed her own hand next to mine, and the plants curved more dramatically toward her. They're also responding to electrical signals and carbon dioxide patterns. They can differentiate between people. She nodded with remarkable accuracy. I've been documenting variations in their responses to different emotional states. She glanced at me. Are you nervous right now? A bit, I admitted. Look at how they're curling slightly at the tips. Now, she placed her hand on my shoulder briefly. Take a deep breath. The warmth of her touch sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. As I exhaled slowly, the ferns relaxed, their movements becoming more fluid. Fascinating, I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I meant the plants or the woman beside me. Later, in her compact laboratory, Elena showed me data readouts from sensors embedded throughout the greenhouse. Each plant species communicates in different ways, through volatile organic compounds, root exudates, or electrical impulses. I've been mapping these communications. Like a plant language. More complex than language, she countered, pushing her glasses up. More integrated, layered. She hesitated, then added, there was a time when I shared these findings openly. What changed? I asked softly. Elena's expression clouded. People, specifically people who saw only profit, not potential. She turned away, organizing tools that didn't need organizing. My former research partner wanted to weaponize certain plant compounds. When I refused, he attempted to steal my work. Is that why you disappeared from academia? She nodded curtly. Trust is like these ferns, Marcus. Once damaged, it takes careful tending to regrow. The use of my first name didn't escape my notice, nor did the parallel she'd drawn between her trust and her beloved plants. Over lunch, a surprisingly delicious vegetable stew she'd prepared, Elena revealed more about her research. Some of her hybridized plants produced compounds with remarkable medicinal properties: pain relief without addiction, targeted tumor reduction, neural regeneration. Why not patent these discoveries? I asked. You could revolutionize medicine. And subject myself to corporate oversight, endless clinical trials manipulated by pharmaceutical companies. She shook her head. My work remains mine until I can ensure it won't be misused. As we walked through a section containing luminescent flora, I noticed her watching me closely. What is it? I asked. You're different from other journalists, she said finally. You see the plants, not just the story. She reached out to adjust a small monitoring device. Most people I've encountered want something from me: recognition, profit, prestige. What do you want, Marcus? The question caught me off guard with its directness. In the gentle glow of the bioluminescent plants, Elena's features were softened, vulnerable even. Understanding, I answered honestly. I want to understand how someone sees beyond what's accepted to what's possible. Something shifted in her eyes then, a recognition, perhaps. The hint of a genuine smile played across her lips. Come, she said, leading me toward a section I hadn't seen before. There's something else I want to show you. As I followed her deeper into the greenhouse labyrinth, I realized that my professional objectivity was becoming increasingly compromised. I wasn't just interested in Elena's research anymore. I was interested in Elena herself, this brilliant, guarded woman who communicated more comfortably with her plants than with people. And the most surprising discovery of all, I was almost certain she was beginning to feel the same way about me. The monsoon season arrived with a vengeance, battering the greenhouse with sheets of rain that transformed the glass dome into a shimmering waterfall. I'd been coming to Elena's sanctuary 3 times a week for nearly 2 months now, and today she was showing me her most ambitious project yet. These, she said, gesturing to a cluster of delicate orchid-like flowers with translucent petals, represent 5 years of work. The blossoms pulsed with soft light, blue, then violet, then a gentle rose, as Elena approached them. Despite having witnessed similar phenomena dozens of times now, the sight still filled me with wonder. They're responding to you, I observed, keeping my distance so as not to interfere with their reactions. Elena nodded. These particular hybrids are extraordinarily sensitive to human biochemistry. She beckoned me closer. Hold out your hand, but don't touch them. As I extended my hand near the flowers, their pulsing changed rhythm, the colors shifting toward amber and gold. "They're reading your endorphin levels, cortisol, even testosterone," she explained, a rare excitement animating her features. "The compound they produce adapts in response." "Adapts to do what?" "That's the breakthrough." Her eyes sparkled behind her glasses. "The compound could potentially regulate human neurochemistry, treating depression, anxiety, PTSD, without the side effects of synthetic pharmaceuticals." The implications were staggering. "Alina, this could change millions of lives." "If applied ethically," she cautioned, "which is why I've kept it private until now." The unspoken acknowledgement hung between us. She trusted me, not just with her story anymore, but with her life's work. Later that evening, as rain continued to pound against the glass, Alina invited me to stay for dinner rather than drive back through the storm. We sat in her small living quarters, the boundaries between interview and personal conversation long since blurred. "I never intended to become a recluse," she admitted, sipping her tea. "It just became easier than constantly defending my methods." The soft lighting caught the auburn highlights in her hair, loosened from its usual practical bun. Without the lab coat and protective gloves, Alina looked younger, more vulnerable. "Isolation can become a habit," I suggested gently. She met my gaze. "Says the man who spends weeks embedded with strangers rather than building a home." I laughed, surprised by her insight. "Touché, journalism does make relationships challenging." "And yet you keep asking questions, seeking connections." "Only with subjects who intrigue me," I replied, immediately regretting how flirtatious it sounded. But Alina didn't withdraw as I expected. Instead, she leaned slightly forward. "And do I intrigue you, Marcus, beyond the professional fascination?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "You know you do." The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. Then Alina stood abruptly, swaying on her feet. "Alina," I moved to her side as she pressed a hand to her forehead. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her pallor suggested otherwise. "Just a reaction, the new compound. I was testing the absorption rates through skin contact." She collapsed against me before she could finish. I carried her to her bed, panic rising as her skin burned with fever. Following her slurred directions, I located her emergency kit and administered the countermeasure she'd apparently prepared in advance. For hours, I sat beside her, monitoring her vitals as the storm raged outside. When she finally opened her eyes near dawn, the relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice hoarse. I brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "Of course I stayed." "The plants," she struggled to sit up, "they'll need." "I followed your automated care protocols," I assured her. "Everything's stable." Surprise flickered across her face. "You understood the systems." "I've been paying attention," I smiled, "to everything." In the soft morning light filtering through the rain-washed dome, something unspoken passed between us. Alina reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. "The orchids," she said softly, "they turned a color I've never seen before when you were near them." Her thumb traced circles on my palm. "Pure white, it indicates." "Indicates what?" I prompted when she trailed off. Instead of answering, Alina drew me closer. Her lips, still warm with lingering fever, found mine in a kiss that felt both inevitable and unexpected. I responded gently, aware of her weakened state, yet unable to deny the attraction that had been building between us. When we separated, the scientist in her returned momentarily. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Your pupils are dilated and your pulse is elevated." I laughed softly, always the researcher. "Not always," she whispered, pulling me back to her. "Not anymore." The first piece of my series on Alina's work published to unexpected acclaim. While I'd been careful to keep the most sensitive aspects of her research confidential, the article generated immediate interest from the scientific community. Alina, initially apprehensive about the attention, gradually embraced the opportunity to share her vision on her own terms. "The Botanical Society has invited you to present at their annual conference," I told her one evening as we sat among her night-blooming specimens, our shoulders touching as we reviewed the correspondence. She tensed slightly. "They rejected my methods 3 years ago. What's changed?" "Perhaps it's the new evidence you've documented. Or," I took her hand, Perhaps it's having an advocate to help frame the narrative. Elena's smile contained a hint of uncertainty. I've spent so long working in isolation that I'm not sure I remember how to navigate that world. You won't be alone, I promised, bringing her fingers to my lips. Our relationship had evolved rapidly since her illness, the professional boundaries dissolving into something neither of us had anticipated. Elena, who compartmentalized her life so carefully, now welcomed me into every aspect of it. Her research, her private thoughts, her bed. The woman who once shied from human contact now sought mine with a passion that matched her scientific fervor. The following week, as Elena prepared preliminary samples for the conference, an email arrived from a name that made her freeze. Dr. James Harlow. My former research partner, she explained, her voice tight. He's requesting access to my current findings. I scanned the message, nodding its superficially collegial tone that barely concealed its demanding undertones. You don't have to respond. He'll keep pushing, she said grimly. James never accepts rejection. Her prediction proved accurate. 3 days later, after Elena had ignored his increasingly insistent messages, the greenhouse security system detected an attempted breach at the perimeter fence. The security footage showed a figure retreating into the woods before we could identify them, but Elena had no doubts. It's beginning again, she whispered. He wants what I wouldn't give him before. We increased security measures, but the incident left Elena on edge. When strange equipment failures began occurring, environmental controls malfunctioning, irrigation systems shutting down, her fears seemed justified. The modification formulas, she explained frantically as we worked to stabilize the greenhouse systems. If the temperatures fluctuate too drastically, everything I've built could be lost. Working through the night, we managed to save most of her specimens, but several of her most sensitive hybrids showed signs of stress. Elena hardly slept, monitoring their recovery with increasing desperation. This is why I couldn't trust the outside world, she said bitterly as we surveyed the damage. People like James see only what can be exploited, not what must be protected. I held her as she finally allowed herself to cry, not just for the damaged plants, but for the years of isolation her fears had imposed. The next morning brought confirmation of her suspicions. Dr. Harlow had published a scathing critique of her recent article, questioning both her methods and mental stability. The subtext was clear to both of us: discredit Elena before she could present her findings. He's trying to undermine you because he can't steal your work, I said, anger building as I read his calculated character assassination. Elena surprised me with her calmness. Let him try, I have something he doesn't. What's that? She took my hand. Evidence, documentation, and someone I trust completely to help me share it. We spent the next week preparing for both the conference and potential further sabotage. Elena methodically cataloged every aspect of her research while I handled communications, legal precautions, and security upgrades. Our evenings, despite the stress, brought us closer. Elena shared stories of her early research, her dreams for how her discoveries could heal both people and the planet. In turn, I confessed my own past, relationships sacrificed to my career, the loneliness of always being the observer rather than the participant. We're both learning a new way to exist, she said one night, her head resting on my chest. Not in isolation, not in constant motion, but in partnership. When Dr. Harlow made his next move, contacting my editor with allegations that I had fabricated key elements of my story, we were ready. The extensive documentation we'd prepared, coupled with statements from the few reputable scientists Elena had cautiously shared her findings with, effectively neutralized his attack. The night before we were to leave for the conference, Elena led me to the center of her greenhouse, where her most precious specimens grew. In the luminescent glow of her botanical creations, she took both my hands. Whatever happens tomorrow, Marcus, I need you to know something. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. You didn't just enter my greenhouse, you showed me a way back into the world. The Grand Botanical Conservatory buzzed with anticipation as Elena took her position at the podium. Hundreds of the world's leading botanists, biochemists, and environmental scientists filled the auditorium, drawn by the promise of witnessing Dr. Elena Verdi's return to the scientific community after years of self-imposed exile. I sat in the front row, our shared secret dancing between us as she adjusted the microphone. To the audience, I was simply the journalist who had broken her story. Only we knew the depths of what had grown between us amid her extraordinary garden. For too long, Elena began, her voice steady despite her earlier nervousness. We've approached botanical research through a lens of human dominance rather than symbiotic partnership. As she progressed through her presentation, displaying carefully selected images and data from her years of isolated work, I watched the audience's reaction shift from skepticism to fascination. When she revealed time-lapse footage of her bioluminescent hybrids responding to different human emotional states, audible gasps rippled through the crowd. These plants don't just react, she explained. They communicate, they adapt, and most importantly, they heal. From the corner of my eye, I spotted Dr. Harlow in the third row, his expression darkening as Elena's presentation gained momentum. When she moved to the section detailing the medicinal compounds derived from her orchid hybrids, he rose abruptly and exited the hall. Our precautions had worked. His attempts to discredit her had failed, and Elena's meticulous documentation left no opening for him to claim the work as his own. After fielding questions for nearly an hour, Elena concluded to a standing ovation. As colleagues swarmed forward to speak with her, I caught her eye across the crowd. The smile she gave me was private, triumphant. Hours later, we returned to the hotel, Elena exhausted, but elated by the reception of her work. 7 different research institutions had extended collaboration offers, and a prominent conservation foundation had expressed interest in funding her continued work. It's overwhelming, she admitted, removing her shoes and sinking onto the edge of the bed. After so long working alone, to have this many people interested in what I've created. I sat beside her, taking her hand. You've changed how they see the potential of botanical research. That was always your goal, wasn't it? She nodded, leaning against my shoulder. But I don't want to lose what I've built, my greenhouse, my independence. You won't have to, I assured her. The right partnerships will respect your approach. The following weeks brought whirlwind changes. Elena carefully selected 2 research institutions to collaborate with, establishing strict ethical guidelines for how her discoveries could be applied. I continued documenting her work, my series expanding into a book contract that would share her vision with an even wider audience. More significantly, we began planning the Elena Verdi Botanical Research Foundation, dedicated to exploring plant-based solutions to environmental and medical challenges. The greenhouse would remain our home base, expanded now with additional facilities and carefully vetted staff. 3 months after the conference, we returned from a meeting with potential foundation donors to find Elena's most sensitive orchid hybrids. The ones that had nearly died during Harlow's sabotage had not only recovered but thrived, producing an unprecedented bloom cycle. They're responding to the changes in the greenhouse environment, Elena theorized as we stood among them. More human presence, more varied interactions. Or perhaps, I suggested, slipping my arm around her waist, they're responding to you, to how different you are now. She turned in my embrace, her scientific certainty momentarily replaced by vulnerability. Am I so different? You've grown, I said simply, just like everything else in this place. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass dome, transforming the greenhouse into a cathedral of living color. Elena had once told me that plants remember, adapt, respond. As I held her close among the miraculous garden she had created, I understood that humans possessed the same capacity. I have something for you, she said suddenly, leading me toward a secluded corner of the greenhouse I hadn't seen before. There, in a specially designed environment, grew a single plant unlike any she'd shown me previously. Its blossoms, iridescent blue with golden centers, pulsed gently as we approached. This is a new hybrid, she explained, her voice soft with emotion. I used genetic material from the ferns that first responded to you, combined with elements from the orchids that helped me understand us. It's beautiful, I said, mesmerized by its gentle movements. It responds only to our combined presence, she continued. Neither of us alone triggers its full bioluminescence. I've named it Harmonia Marcusi. The significance wasn't lost on me. My name, immortalized in her scientific nomenclature. In Elena's world, there could be no greater declaration of love. The foundation is just the beginning, she said, her eyes bright with plans and possibilities. With the right protections in place, my research could help restore damaged ecosystems, develop new medical treatments, even create sustainable food sources for regions affected by climate change. Our research, I corrected gently. Elena smiled, touching the glowing petals of our plant. Yes, ours. As night fell, we walked through the greenhouse together, the pathways illuminated by the gentle glow of Elena's extraordinary creations. The plants seemed to reach toward us as we passed, sensing perhaps the biochemical symphony of our combined happiness. In this enchanted space, not quite earthly, not quite alien, we had both found what we needed. Elena had discovered a way to share her revolutionary vision without sacrificing her principles. And I, the journalist who had spent his career observing others' lives, had finally found a story I wanted to be part of. "Welcome home," Elena whispered as we reached the center of her botanical universe, now ours to nurture together. The greenhouse, once her solitary sanctuary, had transformed into something greater, a place where isolation had given way to connection, where scientific discovery and human emotion intertwined like the DNA of her hybrid creations. What had begun as a sanctuary from the world had become a bridge back to it, on terms neither of us could have imagined when I first stepped through her carefully guarded door.